First, I'm honored to be with my colleagues here today and want to stand behind everything they've just said. A budget is a moral document. That phrase was coined by the faith community. It's now a refrain in all the debates about deficits. But in this week's vote, perhaps today, we'll see one more example of the priorities and the principles of the broader Republican budget and how they apply to the rich and the poor. And because of that, many in the faith community have to conclude that this Republican budget is an immoral document. Let me say, honestly, some of my closest friendships on this Hill have been with Republicans. It's true. And let me say, I don't believe that every Republican who's come here has come here to hurt poor people. I don't believe that. But it is time for those who don't want to hurt poor people in the Republican Party to stand up to the dominant forces in their party which are hurting poor people. We have a genuine hope for long-term bipartisan solutions, and in particular a moral, non-partisan commitment to protect the poor and the vulnerable in these important fiscal debates. And I want to also say that Democratic budgets have not been models of fiscal responsibility and social justice either. Let me say that. But what the House budget is calling for is really morally objectionable on religious grounds, on biblical grounds, and people of faith of all stripes should say that. In particular, as you heard my colleagues say, to roll back tax credits for the poor, to help fund tax breaks for the rich, is simply morally reprehensible. And the faith community has to say that. What this debate reveals at the highest moral lens is the House GOP wants to extend tax cuts and breaks benefits for the wealthiest people in our society, while cutting tax benefits for the poor. You've heard that. Understand this contrast. This is the most egregious, starkly visible contrast in years. These tax credits for the poor, as you've heard, have been effective in lifting families out of poverty. The data shows that. They've been proven. They work to help poor people stay out or get out of poverty. They work. The data all shows that. No one's challenging that. And yet, they're being cut, while the benefits for the wealthy are growing. This is a starkly immoral budget choice. So I want to say as clearly as I can, to reward the rich, which this will do, while actually punishing the poor, which this will do, is a direct offense to all of our religious traditions. It's a direct offense. For Catholic lawmakers, as Simone has said, it is a fundamental violation of Catholic social teaching. And the Catholic bishops have said so. They've called this budget choice unwise and unjust. And every Catholic lawmaker who votes for these misplaced priorities should be held accountable by their church. But that can't stop with Catholics. The Bible confronts every evangelical lawmaker, I'm an evangelical, with more than 2,000 verses which call us to defend the poor and the vulnerable. If we say we believe the Bible, and we do all the time, we simply cannot support policies that directly reward the rich by punishing the poor. You can't do that and say you believe the Bible. So I want to say to my colleagues, lawmakers, you can't keep coming to your prayer breakfast meetings and leave your Bible outside on the table. Senate Democrats should be thanked for blocking these cuts and protecting tax credits for low-income families last week. I want to thank the Senate Democrats for that. But to be honest, neither party has clearly and publicly stated a fundamental principle that the poor and vulnerable must be protected in these debates. I want to hear people say that out loud. The White House, Democrats, and Republicans. Say it out loud. Poor people, poverty, vulnerable people have to be protected. I want to hear it out loud. And that hasn't been done yet. Reducing excessive deficits is a moral act. I agree with that. But how we do it is a moral issue. And so it's time for both parties to commit themselves to this principle, very clear. We will not reduce the deficit in ways that increase poverty and economic inequality. The circle of protection David has already spoken to. Wallis of Sojourners are part of a broad coalition of more than 60 churches and church organizations. Across the spectrum of theology and politics, we have this principle that we are putting to both leadership of both parties. Now, our nation has achieved in the past bipartisan agreement to the principle, when you reduce deficit, you protect poor people. We've done that before. We have done that before, and we should do it again. This is a moral and a religious imperative that we should hold all of our lawmakers to, and the circle of protection is doing that, as David and I can tell you, on both sides of the aisle. Finally, it's time to cut through the political clutter of this place, the ideology, the self-interest. I find myself disgusted when I hear that privately, when Republicans say, well, the reason we can't support these improvements is because they're a part of Obama's stimulus, or we have to be against all of that. That is simply ideological politics hurting poor people, and I'm tired of it. On both sides of the aisle. Here, it's about winning and losing, one side or the other. For us, it's about who benefits and who suffers, the rich and the poor. The circle of protection feels called by God to say this to our political leaders. It's time to do the right thing and protect